Okay. Holger Hoffmann is a registered architect and a founder of One Fine Day, Office for Architecture Design based in Düsseldorf, Germany. In addition to his activities as a practice
Sound is gone.
at the University of in 2011, he has led the chair for digital design at the University of Life Sciences in Tilburg, Germany. Prior to this, Holger worked with UNCD Amsterdam from 2002 until 2008. Here, he has been responsible for the design of projects worldwide, among which the Ladies Club Theatre, the Netherlands, 5 Franklin Place Apartments, New York, and Ardmore Residences in Singapore. Previously, Holger collaborated with UN Studio United Architects, New York, on the competition and entry for the World Trade Center site in 2002, and with Baldus and Wilson, Münster on several projects and competitions.
Okay, sound is gone.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, badly, but I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Thanks for the introduction. What I can do, I can't even see anything right now. No.
Holger, we're gonna shut our microphone while you are speaking. Okay?
Okay, cool. So I start then, right?
Good. Yes.
I would like to use a PowerPoint presentation because I don't think that I mean, you probably don't know any of the work that we are doing. So I would basically share my screen and do a PowerPoint presentation while I speak because I think it gives you some insight on what we're doing. I hope that this works. Yeah, right. Uh, so First of all, again, thanks for the invitation and thanks for letting me take part in your project. I think it's really interesting. I've seen your installation when I was at the Biennale at the opening, and I really enjoyed that. It's really about people, and people partake in the event, and to basically stage in the end the persons that do architecture. Maybe to start with, I said I don't think that you really know what we are doing. We're not a world famous office. I split my time between the University of Wuppertal, and our office. I do have a what you would call a sort of digital background, working for UN Studio, having studied at Städelschule. However, I think my interest does not lie in the digital per se, but much more in disciplinary topics. So I hope one can see that in this say overview of our university work, and I hope one can also see that in this overview of our office work. So One Fine Day has been founded by myself in 2009, and today has two partners, um, Daniela Haag and Hans-Peter Nünning, and we have another colleague, Jan Hoffmann. So we are comparably small scale office. We are involved in a row of different projects. We've been doing a lot of residential projects in the past years, and I basically use the office, or hope, or that's the ambition, to use the office to prove some of the speculations and explorations that we do at the university. So there's a relation between university and office, um, basically where we exchange ideas and where we use the two different realms, hopefully use the different strengths to develop themes, concepts that we then can also test in practice. And then you have asked three, I think, difficult questions. To me, they appear, on the one side, they appear very obvious, but on the other side, they also are sort of tricky. So, out of those three questions, to me, the central question is what does the biennial do? Meaning, or I think if I can answer that, then it would give me some hints to also answer the other two. So to understand why it exists and for whom it exists. manage to understand what it does. So I've split the question on what it does in three different questions, because I think that would help me to understand a little bit broader idea of what it does. So what does the Biennale do to Venice? I think that's one scale one could think of, understand um, also why it exists in the end. And what does the Biennale do to us architects? That aims also on the people for maybe for whom the Biennale has been created in my point of view. And then the third question would be, what does the Biennale do to the exhibited architectural projects? Which, to me, is the core at what it does. Um, so I start with the question, what does the Biennale do to Venice? My
For
point
the
of view. Hello?
hear
Hello?
me? Hello. The voice is jumpy, so I think there's a technical problem right now. So we can barely hear you. So sorry for the inconvenience, but we should check.
Can you please check your microphone? Maybe it's because
I checked my microphone. Let me see. Yeah. Wait 1 second. This works. Oh, not so easy. Do you hear me better now? Now? Is it better now?
Sentence like a long one.
So I really have a
Not very well still.
still not very well. Very well. But my microphone is or is running. Should work.
It was turned off.
So if I
you can continue now.
sorry, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, right now, yes, but sometimes it is jumpy, so it's hard to follow up the sentences. But now it seems good right now. We'll see.
Is it,
I hope.
shall I do a sound check? 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Is that better if I talk now? Is that without any jumps? And is that
Right now, yeah. Tom, let's try to continue. Sorry for the interruption again.
So, shall I start from scratch? Shall I start again, or just continue? Continue. Okay.
No,
Okay.
we can continue.
Okay, then we'll continue.
Questions.
Okay, I start with that. Let me see. So I started with the question, what does the Biennale do to Venice, right? And I think what it does, it renews an ongoing interest in the city and its aesthetics. Every 2 years, it's like the gaze of the architect is directed, or the architects worldwide is directed towards Venice. And it sort of reframes the city with every biennial. So the scenery, city scenery is related to the aesthetics and discourses that happen in the Giardini, the Arsenale, and all other events, since also the Biennale spreads over the city with all sorts of lectures and parties and events. So I think Venice is again and again perceived in the lights of the discourses and themes of the Biennale. So one could say there's always a different Venice. So Venice is, as in this image, as in this capriccio, is a sort of a fiction. It always exists differently. Like here in Canaletto's painting, we immediately understand that this is Venice. However, that sort of Venice has never existed. We as architects know that Palladio has never built his version of the Rialto Bridge, and the two buildings aside the bridge are actually taken from Vicenza, as Aldo Rossi described it in the architecture of the city. So what I like about the Biennale being in Venice is that it questions the scenery of Venice. So Venice as a place that we think, that we know, and that introduces a sort of doubt and speculation rather than of clarity. So to me, context is very important as an architect. And I think it is interesting to think of context not as a fixed or absolute or ideal setting, but as a rather weak environment that is open to intentional misreading and alteration. And then the second question is, what does the Biennale do to architects? This to me has been a key moment now in the current Biennale as well. When I entered this installation of La Carton Vasal, where you suddenly find yourself in a juxtaposition of contexts. You need to be an architect to understand it. So you need to know the project. You need to sort of know where it comes from to, I would say, fully grasp how you're placed in between the actual moment that is in the main pavilion, that is then extended with a view over the Loire and Nantes with people who are in one-to-one size. And then on the other side, you have this glimpse of the Giardini at the outside, this hook with the Carlo Scarpa windows. So it basically puts us in a position where we are, like in this image, both. We are spectators as we perceive it, but we're also actors, because architects are the people who design and who basically contribute to a setting like that. So we're not just tourists or visitors, but I think we are, since we're very directly connected to colleagues, trends, discourses, we're also part of the scenery. So if you visit the Biennale, you see all the other architects strolling through the gardens, you meet people that you know, you meet people that you have not yet met. So you're actually part of the event, the construction of the event. I think you especially, being part of the Turkish pavilion, being part of the Vadia installation, you're sort of both. You're like in noir fiction, you're criminals and detectives. So you're there to explore and to find out things, but you're also the ones who are responsible. You are contributing. And I think fiction here again is a good reference to the, let's also say, picturesque quality of Venice. So we go, as architects, when we enter Venice, we are put in a situation where we are dislocated from our origins. So we have to travel. So we come with a plane or with a train. And then I think, and that fascinates me about the city, we have to really undergo a quite clear transformation. We basically have to enter the city in a sort of cinematic sequence. Maybe more than any other place, because there's no subway, there's no taxi to drop you off. So you really have to enter the city, whether it's with a boat, whether it's with a train or a bus or by feet, but you really have to basically dig yourself into the city. And I think that is part of the transformation that we undergo to, in the end, find us being part of the event. So we are sort of decontextualized at that moment. I think this is what it also does to us. And then we take home when we leave after a few days, because the city is expensive, and so we mostly don't stay there for too long. So we leave with ideas and themes from this very compact event. And we take home this sort of alteration also of our own thinking about architecture and the discipline. And I like this this idea, how it basically transforms us, changes us. And I also think that it changes the exhibited architectural projects, because I think it's an event that also decontextualizes the project. Like in Sam Jacobs' collage on the left side of Poussin's painting of the burial of Phocion, he basically takes the painting that is part of the, you would say, interobjective relation in the glasshouse of Philip Johnson, and montages the glasshouse into this painting. So there's a vice versa relation between different contexts, one being within the painting, the other one being within our world. And there's a sort of idea of reconstructing that context, I would say. It's a sort of reverse contextualization by embedding the pavilion in the painting. And I think that is what's happening to the projects that we be at the Biennale, and I will use Zana's project, Zana's installation, because I knew it from the installation at the East Pavilion in Barcelona, from the text that Beatriz Colomina wrote about it. And I thought when it was installed in the Barcelona pavilion, I thought it was extremely precise because it dealt with the virtuality of the pavilion, with the pavilion as a piece of fiction, as also Robin Evans described it. So it's not about clarity, but I think it's much more about staging, or even staging unclarity, staging the softness, the reference to the curtain that also Zana used. So I thought it was extremely precise in that installation. And then when I saw it back in the Arsenale, I first of all thought, "Oops, that is strange to see it here," because I linked it myself so closely to Mies Pavilion, and now for sure the Arsenal is an entirely different setting. But I thought it did something very interesting to the Arsenal as well, because in Mies Pavilion it merely blurs the space. The spiral that they've built there from perspex is wrapped around the columns, around the chairs, and it creates this vision of an extremely liquid and virtual space where you hardly recognize any figures anymore. It's all distorted, it's all in motion, it's all blurred. But on the other side, I think what happens is basically from also checks photos in Google that other people took of the Zana installation at the Arsenale, I think what it shows are references to this new context, and one can see that on the image here, references that show, for instance, the windows in repetition, also in distortion in that repetition. So you could say there's a critical response to the Arsenale as well, by here nearly quoting or copying figures that are important for the space of the Arsenale. So I also think that it builds a sort of interobjective relationship here that is entirely different than the one in the Mies Pavilion, and that I found interesting, because I think it helps us to, if one compares those two projects, it helps us to understand the relation of similar objects to totally different contexts. It helps us to understand the speculative character of context, so that we can react with an object to context in a rather speculative, vague manner if we understand, you could say, the essence of a context, not in the sense of sameness, meaning the context is as it is and we basically do the same to fit in, but in a rather in an attitude of doubt and speculation. So I think in this one can use the such findings at the Biennale, where projects are also dislocated from their own context, and they are decontextualized and dissected to basically reread them in their actual existence in the world. So one would basically, one sees a model or a drawing or a painting or any other medium of project at the Biennale, and one reads or sees the project in what we call reality afterwards again. With the knowledge that we've gained at Biennale, we might read the project differently. So the project has extended its contextual relation. So maybe to sum a couple of things up, if I try to understand from those three questions, what does the biennial do to the city, to the architects, and to the object? I think it, first of all, generates an ongoing interest in the city that is in a continuous state of decay for hundreds of years. If you read Ruskin, and it adds to the idea that the city is a fiction, so whether it's again John Ruskin or Thomas Mann or Italo Calvino, I think it is a tool for the recontextualization and speculation about origins and identities. And as such, I think it creates influence beyond the actual event. And then I think, yeah, it really is a space for architects, because I think as educated architects, we might be rather able to grasp a lot of the relations that are exhibited or constructed at the biennial. Next to that, it's fun to see other architects that we know and to build networks and to have parties and so forth. So I think it's really a place where we are two sorts of figures in one, the criminal and the detective. So the contributor and the explorer. Um, if I have some time still, I don't know about your schedule, I would like to maybe link this to some of our work at One Fine Day and at the office. Is that okay? Do we still have time for that? Or you would rather want to get into a dialogue? Hello? I don't hear anything anymore. This is really. Can you hear me?
We have
My
an hour.
My question was if I would have time to show a couple of projects to illustrate um, some of the ideas I just explained. Is there time for that?
Yeah, we have time for that.
Okay, cool. Then I go back to my presentation. Wait, wait. Then I go back to this one. Um, So speaking of context and recontextualizing architecture, that is, or speculating about context, that is what I think interests us on Fine Day a lot. I have to say, when we came back from the Netherlands to Germany, we basically had to reinvent ourselves as architects because the topics and interests in studio or in the Netherlands were different, and the German architecture mentality and we had the opportunities to design a couple of houses when we started. So that's what you get as a small office, young architect. You get mostly small scale houses to start with. And one of these houses was not in very urban or cosmopolitan context, which we were actually used to work in when we were in Holland, but was really somewhere in the countryside. In the countryside where houses look like this. Um, these are the typical farmhouses of the region, and what they show are mostly a very large central building that comes from a specific typology that I'm going to show as well. And that shows a lot of buildings around this main building that direct their gables all into different directions. So these are buildings, these are farmhouses that have no front or end. They are true 360-degree objects. So when we started this project that came from a competition for a private client, we really tried to understand in what context we would actually build in, but not in the sense to basically just respond to it, but rather to speculate about what the context could become in the next years when we have added something to it. That is the house that we have added. That is a fairly large house. We always describe it as a farmhouse. In fact, it's not. It's a family with 4 persons. But I think one can see a little bit in the image already how it is embedded in this landscape. It really directs the different gables because it has 4 into several levels. Here you see it from the top, and I think there it becomes maybe a bit clear what makes this project then also different from all the other houses that you would find in the neighborhood. Most of the houses you find there would accept that there's a street from where you enter the house, so it has a clear front side and has a back where you would then have terrace to the garden. And this house actually has, yeah, it has a front for sure because you have a street, but this front actually treated in a similar fashion like as all other sites. So we have used the typology that we found, this sort of farmhouse typology, and developed it further with the help of, that's because how we work with digital tools, in order to explore the potential of figures that we find in the region, meaning the gable roof, but also typologies, floor plan typologies, and also ways of living that we found in the region. So that's how it's looking from the outside. You would always see just fractions of the house. You would always see a gable and some other parts that you hardly understand. So the client was really happy because he told us the good thing is that no one really understands his house when he approaches his street, because you always just get a glimpse. You don't really know how it develops from, because you don't see all four sides normally. But it directs in different directs to different sides actually. That is the basic typology that we use. So that's the so-called Niederdeutsches Hallenhaus, German. It's a tripartite organization with a large space in the center and secondary spaces next to the central space, and a large fireplace at this cross here. And back in the days, people would have even slept above the animals that would be here. So we would have had cows and pigs in here, and people would have used the warmth of those animals. Later on, they added spaces here to live in. So we've used that typology and literally bend it open. That is the plan of the house. Well, I think one can still see the resemblance of the original topology because it still has a large scale central space that you could argue is too large for the size of the house, but it was really important that it is so large because the space connects all the other spaces, the kitchen, the library, the living room, and then you could say the entrance from here and the entrance from the garage. So it literally is the heart of the house. It's also used as that. So that's also here where you find the large dining table. The reference is the so-called Westfälische Diele, meaning the main hall and those kinds of houses. So the sort of estrangement of the typology and the figures that we've used at the exterior, we also used at the interior. So it would not look like a farmhouse for sure, but you would see from the transformation, hybridization, and fusion of the different figures into one whole. You would see that spaces emerge that you would not find in any building in the region there. So here you see the ceiling in the center of the house, so that this is above the two-story high central space. And you see certain figures back always. You would always see the gabled roof back in different scales, in different fractions. This again is the central space. You see the library wing with the gabled roof. There you can literally see how it's expressed at the outside and the inside. And in its interior, the different wings actually come together and form a very complex internal space that is also then clearly connected to the exterior. So it's a relatively complex spatial structure coming from a fairly simple typological background paired with very clear references to the place. So the idea is that we use fragments, figures, typological knowledge, not in a repetitive way in order to answer context, but rather in a speculative manner. What we need for that are systems of order, systems that help to put those fragments and figures in place. Maybe Ungas is a good reference here because his what he called coincidentia oppositorum, which is a Latin word for, you could say, a clash of opposite things, helps to understand how we in architecture can bring different interests, different also signs together in a continuous whole. So here one can see in this Enschede student housing, here one can see how different ways of ordering a project in a transformative manner from small scale box to more and more complex orthogonal structures are sort of or are put in relation with this triangular space with entirely different sorts of figures. There's a there's the same succession of form in here as in here. However, this is all circular and this is all orthogonal. So one could say that the order here brings entirely different fragments together. So this to us is an interesting strategy on how to deal with figures that you recognize, but ways to estrange those figures so that you don't recognize them immediately, so that the building actually can build sort of a critical stance towards its context and question the context, not just answer it. I brought one student project just to highlight that maybe, and also because it was a lot of fun. We worked on it during the summer now. It's our student Lukas Altreuter in Wuppertal, and we did an analysis on, you could say again, contextual information. We analyzed gardens. That was the theme. Was the project was called Gardens of Exuberance. The idea was to learn from the making of gardens as part of an architectural continuum, and then to develop this knowledge further. So Lukas Altreuter took this building, Villa Giulia, which is actually built in Rome during Renaissance, reconstructed it digitally, and then started to say deconstruct it. So basically, try to understand what it does in sequencing the space, in creating a sort of, again, cinematic succession of spaces that are all bound to very clear architectural expressions and figures, and how to develop those figures, expressions, accesses, and further to something that would be probably even more complicated or intricate or rich than what he found, which is hard, I think, because the Giulia is a very complex and very rich spatial setting. So what he did was, you see that in this kind of robot-like model, where you see many different perspectives all at once. So he established new sorts of ordering such an object and ordering the fragments of the original object to make it to something entirely. So here you see all the different pieces that you would find in the villa brought into different ways or different successions of ordering those fragments. Out of the relations of those fragments that are taken from its very clear context and brought into slightly different contexts, he basically could create entirely different spatial constructions. So if I use the university as a place for speculation and exploration, then I think this might be a helpful example. It still deals with similar topics as we deal with in the office, so meaning how to order a project, how to focus complexity, and how to organize complexity. And it also says that, or shows that we try to clearly deal with information that we get either from architectural discipline or specific context. So everything we do is linked to our discipline as such, but also to context. Maybe the last project that's maybe helpful to highlight this, how to bring together fairly different, in this case, ways of organizing space, is a competition entry of 2013 that we handed in at one fine day for the Central Mosque of Pristina, Kosovo. It was an open competition, and if one browses all the projects in the internet, one will see a lot of either very modernist or modern or contemporary or exciting, formally exciting projects, or one will also see quite a bunch of very traditional, mostly Hagia Sophia type projects. And we thought, if we want to have a project there, or if we want to propose a project, we cannot just produce a sort of a mosque, how we would do the interpretation from our, you could say, filter bubble. But we would actually need first to learn about how buildings are organized. That's, I think, what an architect normally needs to do. But then we would not act in the way of repeating what we have found, but we would actually try to basically hybridize the different influences that we found. So that is the tool that we've built to do that. It's a hyperstyle organization of walls. That's something that you find in research, also in Spain, when you research the history of mosques there. Um, so that was, you could say, one influence for the project. And this is just the grasshopper tool that shows the variability, the geometrical variability of this component-based system. The next thing that we would introduce was a different way of differentiating. That's a recursive script. So we needed to have the project in different scales. And here it actually changes typology, you could say. Here it develops from a purely hyperstyle type to a central space type. And developing parts, and you can see that now, of the former wall structure in a sort of Muhanas like ceiling. So we have literally fused different figures, fragments of those figures, and different typologies into one object. And I think what I liked about the project a lot was that it looked both very traditional. I think if one would think of a mosque, one could feel that this represents that idea, but it would also contain a clear 21st century approach to architecture. That is the top view of the mosque, the complexity of the generated walls with the central space in the middle, main walls. That is how it would look from the outside. So when I think if one sees this succession of walls with the integrated minarets and so forth, I think these are patterns that one would recognize, that one would basically accept as being typical, but it would still be a sort of a strange object as it deliberately deviates from the patterns that you know, from the outside as well as from the inside. So this would be the main prayer hall, where you see that the columns from the hypostyle organization at the wings have developed into kind of ornamented ceiling or cupola in this case. So I think that's basically to highlight or to illustrate a bit our goal on contextualization. We might call it, it's a working title, speculative contextualism, an approach to context or the discourse around context that puts a context or that understands a context, as I described Venice, as a rather fictional, soft environment in which we would then feed in architectural pieces in order to not only further develop things that you find in the context, but also, especially in the case of this farmhouse villa that we did, also question the context as it is. So I switch this off now and go back to wait, I need to switch off the screen. Where do I do this? Um, um, now you should see me again, right?
Yeah, I think we have a question. Hi. Thank you for the presentation. It was really interesting to listen to. My question is about the experimentation part in your studio at the university. Do you only use the formal parameters in your experiments, or do you also, I mean, are they the results that the, for example, climate or human, this came up?
I didn't get the last part. The internet was hanging. Could you repeat the last half sentence?
Sorry. Yeah. Basically, it's about do you include other parameters like climate or human scale issues or other any other parameter other than cultural and formal studies?
We have been doing that for years. So I have to admit, when we started, it was actually fairly easy to use all sorts of performative, for instance, to argue for the type of architecture that we do. But I just need to switch this off a bit. But I think what I've changed to mainly look at architecture as such, as the architectural object, the architectural fragment as such, void of any social or performative climate and so forth content. In order to understand better just the fragment, what it does, and then if necessary, we can later again load it with all sort of heteronomic information. But first, to understand the purely aesthetic aspects of an object, in this case, was the most important to us. We have done that differently, but for me, it's a very positive evolution to also break with the dogma of functionalism and performance-oriented design that we very much have in Germany, and clearly look at the relation or interrelation of the formal aspects of the building. Because I think I've learned that with the project that I've shown you with the house, and especially with the also with the mosque, we have argued none of the projects with, you could say, performative or functionalist arguments, but we have for sure these projects work. So we have built a house that the client responded to, that on which the client responded that he really likes to live there because all works. So he's really happy because he has this sort of plan and so forth. But it has never been part of our argument. The argument was always how to fit into that sort of farmhouse region. And then, yes, we used you could say, the normal means of parametric design to design the roof, to do the construction, but it has all not been driven by performance criteria. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this informational presentation. We need to go now. We are so sorry to leave this here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much again.
Thank you very much for having me. It's really strange to be at the Biennale like this. Okay, thank you. Bye. Bye. I will get rid of this.